Amazing transformation. Mother's debt led to a surprising love story with a mafia boss revealed. Sarah's hands trembled as she adjusted the drip for her patient. The hospital's sterile scent mingled with the heaviness of her heart, buried under mounting bills and the crushing weight of her family's financial despair. The ultrasound picture of her father, once so vibrant as a political activist, now felt like a ghost anchored by the iron chains of wrongful imprisonment. Her heart twisted at the thought the chill of eviction loomed closer, darkness tightening its grip around their home, the haven where her children played. Taking a deep breath, she steadied herself. With her eldest home sick, and her youngest rattling demands in a world of crayons at school, the burden of it all threatened to engulf her. Each late shift felt less like a lifeline and more like an insatiable void where hope flickered dimly. Doubt wrapped tightly around her, whispering insidiously, what if you fail? What if you lose everything? Drowning in her thoughts, Sarah stepped outside the diner, desperate for fresh air, the chaos of her responsibilities beckoning her back inside. And that's when it happened. She collided with Marco. A split second transformed into a standoff of curiosity and fear. He seemed nothing like the men she'd warned her children about, but everything she feared. His eyes held a charm laced with danger. He was the notorious son of the local mafia boss, the very essence of the dark allure she had always avoided. The magnetism tugged at her, igniting feelings she had long buried beneath an avalanche of duty. Would she let this man step into her fray, this man who could either instigate chaos or breathe life into her suffocating existence? Their initial exchange was fraught with tension. He offered help, a way out of her spiraling debts. But her instincts screamed against it, a mixture of thrill and repulsion. His trouble, her mind warned while her heart thumped erratically beneath the weight of his proposition. Could she really trust someone like him, when everything she stood for revolved around protecting her children from the darkness lurking in shadows like his? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Each day after, Sarah found herself drawn closer to Marco. Their conversations flowed like the river that snaked through town, revealing shared understandings of hardship and pain buried in their histories. Yet the more intimate their bond became, the more she questioned her values. Was it worth endangering her principles for the sake of a man steeped in a violent legacy? Just as uncertainty threatened to unravel her, news broke through on her father's case, a potential breakthrough she had longed for, yet the essence of hope felt tainted. Each revelation brought deeper despair, intertwining their fates more tightly than she ever anticipated. A confrontation loomed on the horizon, one that could threaten the delicate balance she had built for her family. With every beat of her heart, Sarah faced an insurmountable choice. Stand firm in the morals she had instilled in her children, or plunge into the forbidden with Marco, a chance to escape poverty and suffering, even if the cost shattered her ideals. Shadows danced menacingly around her as her thoughts spiraled, leaving her breathless and yearning for resolution. In the turbulent depths of her psyche, one question echoed louder than the rest: could she navigate this treacherous path laid before her, or risk losing everything to the darkness that sought to consume them all? The tension in Sarah's chest coiled tighter with every heartbeat, the pull between duty and desire jarring her resolve. As she left the hospital that evening, the weight of responsibility clung to her like a heavy coat. She couldn't shake off thoughts of Marco, his confident smile and the power he seemed to wield. What if he was the answer to her problems? Driving home, the mundane scenery blurred past, the streetlights flickered like scattered hopes, illuminating the weight of her impending decisions. She pulled into her driveway, the fading daylight creeping over the familiar surroundings. A place that once felt safe now loomed over her, stark reminders of her struggles. The mortgage was overdue, the lights would soon follow, and her father's trial hung like a storm cloud overhead, threatening to release its fury. That night, as the moonlight spilled through her window, illuminating the piles of bills littering the kitchen table, a sense of defiance began to stir within her. For weeks, she had been a caretaker in the service of others, yet who was looking after her? Would constantly adhering to her values while watching her family suffer even qualify as strength? Or was she merely a prisoner of her own moral code, afraid to step into a light that could break the chains of her existence? As if summoned by her tumultuous thoughts, her phone chimed a message from Marco. It was simple, an invitation to meet at a small cafe known for its strong coffee and dim lighting. The place was shadowed in mystery, often frequented by the same people who occupied the clandestine corners of the city. Her mind raced with apprehension. Yet her yearning for connection, for guidance, wrestled with her fears. She found herself reaching for her coat, heart pounding. This small act of rebellion felt monumental. What would it mean to sink deeper into this relationship? Would it expose her children to danger? Or could it offer them safety? Time slipped by, and soon she was sitting in a booth, a sliver of hope really a possibility etched in the dark veneer of the cafe walls. Marco was already there, relaxed yet attentive, his presence unfurling a strange warmth that both soothed and ignited anxiety. "You came," he said, his voice smooth, pulling her into the moment. In that instant, she felt the weight of her choices like never before, the thrill and dread swirling together in a dance around her heart. "You don't have to stay in your lane, Sarah," he continued, probing gently. "Life doesn't always follow the rules. Sometimes, stepping out of the box is what it takes to find freedom." His words burrowed into her consciousness, igniting a flicker of rebellion she had long suppressed. Could she have the courage to carve her own path, free of the chains that bound her to suffocating norms? That night transformed into one of deliberation and reflection. Sarah weighed her father's fight for justice against the safety of her family, the invisible strings of her responsibilities still tugging insistently. The walls of her reality seemed to close in, and for the first time, she contemplated a life beyond the stark confines of her routine. As she drove home, thoughts of Marco ignited a flurry of unresolved emotions. Was this infatuation a dangerous distraction or a new opportunity? The decision of how to move forward loomed larger than before, but the most uncomfortable question lingered in her mind: how far would she be willing to go to protect the ones she loved, no matter the potential fallout? With her heart pounding in tumultuous anticipation, she knew she stood on the precipice of something transformative. She needed to face the illusions she held that had kept her anchored. The time had come to confront her boundless fears and liberate herself from the prison of her self-imposed limitations. The morning light seeped through the blinds, casting slats on Sarah's heavily furrowed brow. Sleep had eluded her, filled instead with visions of Marco's inviting smile and the chaotic murmurs of her own doubts. She took a deep breath, gathering herself for the day ahead. The bills still loomed, and her father's impending trial felt like a ticking clock pushing her toward a decision that could alter the very fabric of her life. As she prepared breakfast for her children, each clatter of dishes reminded her of the weight she bore. They deserved stability, yet the fears swirled like a tempest in her mind. Could she emerge from the depths of defeat and reclaim a semblance of power over her circumstances? Or would her propensity for responsibility bury her deeper? Before work, Sarah took a detour and parked outside the cafe where she had met Marco. The familiar scent of freshly brewed coffee beckoned her like a siren, but fear clenched her stomach tightly. Should she confront him once more? Could he be the catalyst for her transformation, or merely a distraction from the reality she faced? Gripping the steering wheel, she questioned her intentions. Was she seeking guidance or merely validation? To forge a path that could lead her away from the suffocating constraints of her existence? Her gut spoke louder than her mind, muttering insistent calls toward change. Just one conversation, she told herself. As she stepped inside the cafe, the warm ambience felt like a refuge. Marco recognized her right away, his expression lighting up as he motioned her to join him at a secluded table. Today, something was different. His demeanor exuded a blend of confidence and challenge that both terrified and fascinated her. "Did you sleep?" he asked, his voice inviting yet probing, as if he could sense the sleepless turmoil beneath her surface. "I didn't," she confessed, grappling with her truth. Too much on my mind. Good. It means you're awake to what matters, Marco replied, leaning forward, his eyes locking onto hers. The question is, are you giving yourself the freedom to act on it? Her pulse quickened at the boldness of his words. What was he suggesting? She could reveal all her burdens, yet she hesitated. Life had taught her that vulnerability bred danger. But perhaps it also seeded growth. I want to fight for my family, she finally said, the words spilling out in a desperate whisper. And what if I told you there's a way to do that, outside the rules you've been adhering to? Marco's smile bore a hint of mischief. You think your father's situation is limiting? The system is flawed, Sarah. It's just as easy to work outside of it. Those words struck like lightning, illuminating a suppressed yearning within her. This was the moment fate dangling a proposition at her feet. The familiar weight of guilt was still present, but it transformed into something different, intrigue. Are you saying you could help? She asked, cautious yet curious. Is that even safe? Safety is a construct, and every choice has its price, Marco replied, his gaze unyielding. But you could gain more than you lose. Sarah leaned back, contemplating. The shackles of her current existence felt tighter than ever, but what if she could redefine the parameters of her life? It was frightening yet exhilarating. All she had known had led her to this precise crossroads. Think about this, Marco continued. You can be the architect of your future, not just the passenger watching it unfold. What will it take to push you over the edge? As she pondered his proposition, a realization began to dawn. The very chains she believed were securing her were, in fact, suffocating her dreams. The love she had for her family didn't have to confine her, it could set her free, as long as she was willing to take the risk. A pulse of determination surged within her, igniting a thirst for autonomy that had lain dormant for too long. But before she could respond, the cafe door swung open, creating a gust that sent a chill down her spine. The figure standing in the doorway brought a halt to her thoughts. A familiar face from her father's world. The edginess in the air was palpable, their eyes locked across the room. The moment of clarity she had just begun to embrace was suddenly framed by the potential for danger. This unforeseen confrontation could turn her world upside down. What choice would she make when the shadows from her past stepped into her present? The figure that crossed the threshold of the cafe was unmistakable, a sharp silhouette that brought with it a blast of memories she tried to lock away. Sarah's heart raced, caught between flight and fight. The voice of her instincts screamed for caution, warning her about the consequences of engaging with this apparition from her father's past. Yet, Marco's calm acceptance of the world around them seemed to challenge her tight grip on fear. Do you know him? Marco's question nudged Sarah out of her daze. Yes, she murmured, eyes riveted to the newcomer. He's part of my father's dealings. Then we need to act, Marco stated decisively, his energy shifting from warmth to urgency. Do you want to run, or do you want to confront? In that moment, the familiar weight of her choices crashed down upon her once more. She could choose flight, returning to the shadows of her fears, or stand firm and reclaim her narrative. The thought of retreat felt all too familiar. It was the path she had walked many times, always in service of protecting her family. But what had that ever truly yielded her? An existence rife with constraints, suffocating her aspirations under a blanket of duty. Confront, she whispered, more to herself than to Marco, realizing that right there, over her cup of lukewarm coffee, was a chance to redefine her existence. She took a steadying breath, heart hammering in her chest. I won't hide anymore. Marco's expression shifted to one of approval, a slight nod encouraging her forward. His presence felt like a beacon, illuminating a route dangerously enticing. Preparing herself, she pivoted towards the entrance, locking eyes with the figure who had once represented fear, her father's associate, and now her own potential undoing. Long time no see, Sarah, he said, an unsettling smirk twisting across his lips. What are you doing in a place like this? None of your business, she replied, her voice stronger than she felt. I'm here for the coffee, but you roaming in uninvited is a tad inappropriate. Maybe check your behavior next time. His brows lifted in apparent surprise, a flicker of respect momentarily crossing his features that deepened her resolve. Perhaps the years of silent obedience had fed into a narrative of weakness, but her newfound sense of agency sparked a fire in her. Marco stood by her side, silent but steadfast, his solidarity bolstering her confidence. She could feel the tension clinging to the air, each second stretching into infinity. Engaging him was risky, yet surrendering to fear was far more perilous. You should be careful, Sarah, he warned, his tone shifting to something more menacing. You're treading on dangerous ground just like your old man. There it was, the shadow of her past threatening to choke the breath from her ambitions. I might be on dangerous ground, but it's my ground now. The challenge was subtle, yet palpable, her words standing as a declaration against the life she had led up to now. She wasn't just a pawn in an inherited game, she was willing to wield the pieces herself. That's a cute thought, he replied, amusement dancing in his eyes. But stakes are high, let us hope you can handle the pressure. Marco shifted slightly, but she held her ground, undeterred. I'm not afraid of pressure. I'm learning to thrive under it. With unexpected boldness, she cast a quick glance back at Marco, seeing approval mirrored in his expression. This confrontation was no longer simply about her past, it was a catalyst for her transformation. The man before her took a step closer, a challenging spark igniting between them, and in this moment, Sarah had a sharp realization. In confronting the fear she had lived under for so long, she unearthed a strength she had never recognized. Little did she know, this was just the beginning. As he leveled his gaze at her, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. Perhaps he sensed the shift, her newfound conviction unsettling the dynamics of power he had once held over her. Yet her heart raced not solely from panic but from empowerment, ignited by Marco's influence and the cracks forming in the chains of her past. Suddenly, she knew, the next choice was hers to make, her life hanging in the balance of courage versus compliance. What happens next? She asked, her voice steady but intrigued, bracing for an answer that could ripple outward, shaping not only her future but also the lives of those she loved. And that charged moment, fate hung in the air, ripe with potential. What would she discover about herself if she embraced this fight? The door swung open once more, and in walked another figure, a muscle-bound man with a reputation that sent shivers down her spine. The stakes had just risen dramatically, and she now had the attention of powers she had never anticipated. Would this push her toward her liberation or pull her under into darkness? The cafe buzzed with an undercurrent of tension as the muscle-bound man strode in, his presence commanding attention and shifting the dynamics of the room. Sarah's instincts flared, every fiber of her being warned her to retreat. Yet, she refused to let fear dictate her actions anymore. She inhaled deeply, drawing courage from the knowledge that she was reclaiming her narrative. "Who's this?" the newcomer inquired, his voice rich and deep, scanning the space before settling on her with predatory interest. "This is Sarah," Marco interjected, taking a protective stance beside her. "Someone you'd do well not to underestimate." The man's smirk deepened, his eyes glinting with amusement as he stepped closer. "Interesting. I like that." He turned back to Sarah, leaning slightly forward, projecting intimidation that wrapped around her like a vice. "Your father never mentioned you were this spirited. But then again, this little charm of yours and the trouble it brings might just be one of his favorite games." Sarah's composure wavered but did not shatter. "I'm not a pawn in anyone's game. If anything, I'm ready to change the rules. You either deal with me directly or step aside." The words slipped out before she could overthink the consequences, surprising even herself. Was her bravery real, or was it just a mask concealing her fear? "Impressive, little warrior," he drawled, assessing her with an intrigued expression as if inspecting a rare artifact. "But where does this newfound boldness come from? Do tell." For a moment, her thoughts drifted back to the years of living in her father's shadow, the suffocating pressure that forced her into silence. Yet here she stood, dismantling that facade piece by piece. It comes from my past, yes. But what you don't know is that I'm here to break free from it, not to repeat it. The muscle-bound man crossed his arms over his chest, clearly enjoying her defiance. So, a rebel with a cause? You ought to know that fighting against the current can get you drowned. The world we live in isn't kind to dreamers. Maybe so, she countered, feeling a rush of adrenaline push her deeper into this confrontation. But the only thing worse than drowning is never having tried to swim. Marco's approving gaze made her feel seen, providing an extra layer of armor against the man whose attention now felt like a spotlight rather than a threat. But the stakes were higher than before. She was not just reclaiming her voice for herself but also for others who felt silenced. Bold words for someone still tethered to the past, the new figure challenged, regard still gleaming with curiosity. But understand this: those who seek independence often underestimate the consequences of their choices. Her heart raced, but not from fear. It quickened with determination as she began to see a path unfolding, a realization coiling within her. She had been granted access to the power dynamics of a world she had previously shied away from. And those consequences are exactly what I'm prepared to face. For a moment, the cafe fell silent, the air thickened with palpable potential. It was a defiant standoff, two worlds crashing against each other. Then, without warning, the muscle-bound man's demeanor softened slightly. You might have more spirit than I gave you credit for. I've seen many like you lose themselves in this game. But if you're playing, know the risks and rewards. Life is a transaction. Suddenly, the reality of her situation hit Sarah. Engaging with figures like these could lead her to heights she had only fantasized about or plunge her into darkness she thought she'd escaped. She could nab a chance at reclamation, but at what cost? I'm willing to pay what I have to for my freedom, she laid bare, her conviction steel-like. As the newcomer pondered her response, a swirling thought invaded her mind. What would her father say if he were here? Would he even recognize the daughter who had swapped submission for tenacity? The internal conflict churned inside her, affirming her growth while forging questions that lingered. Let us see how you fare in this world, then, he finally said, a hint of a challenge lacing his tone before he made a show of glancing at Marco. You'll be my eyes on her. Keep her in line, will you? Sarah's pulse raced with the thrill of what lay ahead, her resolve hardening even more. She sensed in this moment that whatever she would discover about herself could lead to a formidable transformation. But was she ready for the potential consequences lurking around the corner? As they exited the cafe, the weight of decision engulfed her. Would she walk this risky path or retreat into the comfort of her old life? A new chapter beckoned, filled with the promise of self-discovery and daunting challenges. With Marco by her side, she took a step forward. This was her moment to claim her next move could define the very essence of her freedom. Are you ready to embrace what lies ahead? Marco asked softly, his voice steady. Sarah met his gaze, a spark of determination igniting within her. Ready or not, I won't back down this time. What comes next will reveal who I truly am. And as they walked into the unknown, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that the real trial was just beginning. Untamed waters awaited her, and she would have to paddle through treacherous currents to find her way to freedom. Would she sink or swim as the tides began to rise? The street outside the cafe was alive with the sounds of the city, yet Sarah felt enveloped in a bubble of stillness. There was a palpable shift within her. Every step she took alongside Marco felt charged with anticipation. The thrill of rebellion coursed through her veins, mingling with an undercurrent of uncertainty, and she was learning to embrace both. An unseasonably warm wind stirred the air around them, and with it came a fresh wave of clarity. Sarah had always been aware, unconsciously or otherwise, of her father's looming influence. But tonight, she would relinquish that shadow. The man who had straddled the line between protector and captor was behind her now. She had the power to forge ahead. What are you really thinking? Marco asked, his brow furrowed as they walked toward a dimly lit alley just off the main street. I'm thinking that this is the first step into a territory I've only read about, she replied, trying to mask her trepidation with bravado. But in a way, it excites me. I've spent too long playing the role of the dutiful daughter. Now it's time for my own script. His expression softened, and a hint of respect flickered in his gaze. It takes guts to step into this world, Sarah. You do know what you're getting into, right? More than I did before. Each word was a declaration of her resolve. If I have to navigate through uncertainty and danger, so be it. I refuse to remain a passive character in my own life. They emerged from the alley and into a small plaza, where flickering lights illuminated a handful of storefronts. Being out in the open, the tension from earlier began to dissolve slightly. Yet, with that relief came a new apprehension, the realization that her actions would aim straight at the heart of her father's empire. If I'm going to own my choices, Sarah continued, her voice steady, I need to know what they mean. What does it really mean to push back against my past? Am I strong enough? Can I actually change the narrative? Marco nodded, considering her words carefully. You're already proving that strength exists within you. Every challenge you face will either affirm that strength or test it to its limits. Expect the unexpected. Sarah swallowed hard as they entered a modest yet bustling bar adorned with dark wood and plush seating. The clink of glasses and the low hum of conversation enveloped them like a curtain. People mingled with an air of confidence, and she wondered if they could feel how transformed she already was. As they settled into their seats, Marco leaned closer. It won't just be the men you'll deal with, it's the information, the nuances in this world of power dynamics that you need to be prepared for. He gestured for a drink, then locked eyes with her. Not to mention the alliances you need to build. The bartender approached, handing Marco a drink while Sarah scanned the room. Her mind raced, every word he spoke seemed more urgent, pulling her deeper into an undercurrent of strategy that was unfamiliar yet intoxicating. Are you saying I need to play a game? She asked, an edge of determination peppering her voice. I'm saying you need to learn to play the game on your own terms, he replied, his tone earnest. Understand your strengths and weaknesses. You'll be noticed, both by allies and threats. As Sarah considered his words, something shifted within her. It wasn't just about breaking away from her father, it was about asserting her potential. She could channel her experiences into a strategy, crafting a path built on her choices rather than someone else's designs. She would not just be a participant in this world but a strategist ready to navigate its complexities. The thought invigorated her, and for the first time in her life, she envisioned her future as something not dictated by her lineage but by her ambition. Then I will learn quickly, she said, her decision crystallizing as she locked eyes with Marco once more. With the evening unfolding before her, Sarah took a deep breath, ready to embark on this journey. She was poised on the precipice of something vast and uncharted. Equipped with the will to forge her place. But as invigorating as it was, shadows loomed nearby, potential traps waiting to ensnare the unprepared. So what's next? She asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil swirling in her mind. Marco smiled knowingly. The time has come to face those who may not welcome your rebirth. Are you ready? As the weight of his words settled heavily on her shoulders, Sarah considered her looming confrontation with the unknown forces that sought to uphold her father's legacy. Would she emerge victorious, or would the challenges ahead threaten to drown her newfound resolve? With a mixture of fear and determination, they finished their drinks and braced for what lay beyond the bar's comforting glow. In a realm that could easily turn hostile, decisions awaited that would test her depth and resilience, and as the door swung open and they stepped out into the night again, Sarah's heart raced with the promise of the trials ahead. Would her newfound power stand against the vulnerabilities that still lingered beneath the surface? The chill of the evening air wrapped around Sarah as she and Marco stepped back onto the bustling streets. The noise of the city surged like a wild tide, but Hannah found her focus sharpening. Each dim lamp and shadow cast a new context to the world she had long navigated, an unfamiliar territory now teeming with potential. Their first stop was a discreet networking bar where figures from various businesses mingled. Every corner whispered secrets of power and ambition, a tension that made Sarah's heart thrum. "Are you sure about this place?" she asked, a flicker of doubt igniting within her. "Trust me," Marco replied, his voice steady and reassuring. "You'll find what you need here, and others will find you if you're brave enough to show up." As they entered, Sarah's senses ignited. The style and design spoke of understated wealth and influence. Her pulse quickened. She was standing on the threshold of the game Marco had alluded to. There was a calculated confidence in the air, and her previous insecurities began to fade. Yet, their absence was replaced by an acute awareness of her inexperience. Taking a deep breath, she steeled herself. One look around revealed a melting pot of individuals cloaked in ambition, and she realized the stakes were high. This was a world where she needed to learn swiftly, adapt carefully, and wield her intellect keenly. "Stay close," Marco advised as he moved through the room, leading her toward a group huddled around a table where a heated discussion was underway. The air thickened with intrigue, and Sarah felt her instincts kicking in as the realization hit her she had to forge connections, prove her worth. As they approached, she caught fragments of their conversation. Terms like expansion and partnership slid past her ears, and she felt an electric thrill race through her. This was where positions were fought for, alliances solidified, and reputations built. Her gut twisted with anticipation, igniting a determination she hadn't fully acknowledged until now. "Remember, listen more than you speak," Marco reminded her as he introduced her to the group. She could feel his belief in her pressing her forward. But a sense of vulnerability lingered beneath her bravado. How could she hold her ground among seasoned players of a game she had barely begun to understand? A young man named Ethan caught her attention. His charisma was infectious, and he expounded on ideas with an energy that was commanding. Sarah felt drawn in, absorbing the dynamics of interaction. However, she couldn't shake a feeling of inadequacy. He was sharp, assured, and assuredly harnessed an ethos she had yet to develop. "What's your angle?" He turned to her after a brief lull, his piercing gaze demanding more than surface-level small talk. Sarah's heart raced. "I believe in shaking up the status quo," she replied, her voice unsteady yet fortified with resolve. "Points of view can be narrow in this industry. New alliances might be the key." Ethan raised an eyebrow, amused yet intrigued. "Bold for a newcomer. But can you deliver on that promise?" Instead of retreating, every word she had rehearsed now felt like live fire in her veins. "You have to take risks to gain rewards," she challenged back, feeling the momentum of her words shift the room's energy. Marco observed her reaction, a proud look gracing his features. She was shaping the narrative around her, displaying a courage that had once seemed elusive. As conversations resumed, Sarah felt a shift within herself. Self-doubt began to morph into empowerment. She stood a little taller, engaged a little more deeply. Her thoughts raced, weighing this new strength against past hesitations, and she thought of her father's empire, looming like a dark cloud. "What's next, Sarah?" Marco whispered as the crowd began to disperse. "Next?" she murmured, the fire in her spirit igniting fully now. "I need to find out who my real allies are. This isn't just about my father's world, it's about claiming my own." With newfound clarity driving her, she scanned the room, instantly plotting her next moves, scorning the vulnerabilities that used to paralyze her. It was not just a battle for legitimacy but a quest to redefine her identity in a network that respected strength and cunning. But as they stepped out into the waiting night, she felt an undertow of disquiet. How would her father react to her deliberate entanglement in this web? Would she unleash a storm of consequences that might come crashing down on her newfound resolve? The ghosts of her past felt more palpable than ever, leaving an unsettling question that crept into her mind. Would the risk of pursuing her independence cost her everything she had just begun to claim? The city lights flickered above as Sarah stepped away from the bar, her heart racing with both exhilaration and apprehension. Each calculated stride felt like a step deeper into uncharted territory, where her past and future collided, and she sensed the weight of her choice heavier than she anticipated. Marco walked alongside her, a steadying presence in this whirlwind of transformation. "You held your own in there," he said, pride radiating from his eyes. But beneath his compliment lay an unspoken expectation. He wasn't just pushing her for the sake of challenge. He was testing whether she truly wanted to step into a world where stakes weren't just professional but intensely personal. "I felt alive," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. The fire ignited within her had revealed fragments of a self she only dreamt of becoming, a self defined not by her father's shadow but by her potential. They reached a nearby cafe, its warm light beckoning like a sanctuary for her racing thoughts. As they settled into a nook, Sarah picked up her coffee, allowing its warmth to seep into her fingers, hoping it would momentarily quell her brain's restless activity. Yet the familiar gnawing doubt lingered. What if I mess this up? What if I fail to carve my own path? The very words felt foreign, a remnant of her old self. "Failure is just a stepping stone," Marco replied, leaning closer, his tone serious yet encouraging. "Every connection you make, every risk you take, brings you closer to your true self. No one rises without facing the threat of collapse first." His conviction resonated deeply, igniting the flicker of ambition inside her. Sarah realized her moments in the bar weren't just about standing her ground, they were about recognition. Recognition of her voice, her ideas, and her ability to influence the same environment that intimidated her. "I need to make my mark, not just align with what's expected of me," she declared, an unwavering resolve taking root. With each strategic thought, she began to craft not only a professional vision but a personal manifesto that transcended her familial ties. As they took their leave from the cafe, Sarah felt the lingering murmur of the city echo her newfound determination. But along with this empowerment came an unexpected heaviness. The knowledge that this pursuit could cost her the relationships she held dear gnawed at her. A confrontation with her father loomed ahead, and the uncertainty it brought had her heart skipping beats. That night, alone in her apartment, Sarah sat at her desk, the dim glow from her laptop illuminating the pages of her journal. She began outlining a plan, her ideas for reforming her father's business model, introducing innovative partnerships. But as her pen moved swiftly across the page, the gravity of her ambition settled heavily inside. This was more than a professional proposal, it was her declaration of independence. Choosing this path might create chasms in the very foundations of her family, and that realization chilled her resolve. Was she prepared to sacrifice the seemingly stable relationships she had for the chance to build something uniquely hers? The thought tested her integrity. In her pursuit to stand out, would she inadvertently become estranged from those she cared about? It was then that a haunting thought emerged: could building her own empire mean tearing down the one her father had painstakingly crafted? The parallels between ambition and betrayal danced in a dangerous rhythm, and she felt the tremors of what lay ahead. With her heart racing and a knot forming in her stomach, she resolved that she couldn't turn back now. The promise of truth and authenticity beckoned her to forge ahead, even if it meant stepping into a storm. And as she penned the final outlines of her plan, one question lingered in the shadows: would claiming her independence strengthen her spirit, or would it fracture the identity she had known? As the pages filled, Sarah suddenly felt an overwhelming need to confront her father, to seek clarity on her future and how it would intertwine with his past. Would she find understanding or a defensive response ready to guard what he'd built? The moment of confrontation hung in the air, and she knew it was time to face not just her father but also the choices she would make to define who she truly was. The morning sun poured through Sarah's window, flooding her room with a golden hue that seemed to soften the anxiety gripping her heart. She had barely slept, her mind churning with the immensity of the conversation that lay ahead. Today wasn't just another day, it was the day she would finally speak her truth. Dressed in a tailored blazer that made her feel simultaneously empowered and exposed, Sarah caught her reflection in the mirror, a woman ready for battle but also a little girl seeking validation. Her fingers brushed against the lapel, reminding her of her purpose. Today wasn't about approval, it was about asserting her own identity. As she drove to her father's office, the city zoomed past her, familiar streets transformed into an obstacle course. The thought of facing him suffocated her resolve, leaving her with a mixed sense of dread and determination. She replayed some of her notes for the presentation in her mind, trying to anticipate his reactions, and calling forth the confidence Marco had instilled in her. Arriving at his sprawling corporate building made the stakes suddenly feel more real. The grandeur of it felt like an extension of her father's ego, a monument to the life he'd built, an empire she longed to influence yet feared to dismantle. Sarah approached the elevator and pressed the button, her finger trembling slightly, a stark indicator of the turbulence brewing within. Once inside, she closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and visualized the outcome she desired. It wasn't just about presenting her ideas, it was about reclaiming her narrative. The elevator doors opened, and she stepped out, each stride towards her father's office solidifying her resolve. The office was exactly as she remembered, sumptuous and intimidating. Her father sat at his desk, engrossed in a spreadsheet on his computer. She cleared her throat, heart racing, and summoned the courage to interrupt. "Dad, can we talk?" The words felt monumental as they reverberated through the room. He looked up, eyebrows knitting together in surprise but quickly transforming to mild irritation. "What is it, Sarah?" "I'm busy." The dismissive wave of his hand felt like a physical barrier, yet she pressed on. "I have been working on a proposal to reform the business model, introduce new partnerships," she began, the words tumbling forth, pushing against the wall he had erected. "I believe we could expand in ways that would honor the foundation you built, but also seek innovative paths." His expression darkened, and she could see the gears turning in his mind, each one marking potential conflict. "Are you sure you understand what you're suggesting? This isn't play, this is our legacy." The use of "our" twisted through her like a blade. "I'm not trying to discard our legacy, Dad. I want to build on it. But I can't do it if you don't allow me to have a voice," she replied, voice steadying as adrenaline coursed through her. For a moment, silence hung thick in the air. She could see him calculating between pride for her initiative and the instinct to cling to control. The tension gnawed at her insides, desperation threading into her plea for understanding. "Do you think I built this company for you to just rewrite it?" he snapped, leaning forward. "You don't know how hard I've worked for this." Her heart raced at his tone, and rising anger ignited within her. "I built my life under the shadow of your expectations, but this is about my vision, Dad. You may not see me outside of being your daughter, but I have my own dreams. I deserve to explore them without your constant scrutiny." The room shifted as their conflict ignited a familiar pattern of family dynamics, but Sarah felt something different, a resolve that this time would not be silenced. He stared at her, a thousand emotions swimming in his eyes: anger, disappointment, and perhaps something resembling fear. She hoped that this confrontation wouldn't fracture their relationship but would instead lay the groundwork for something stronger. She needed to know where she stood, yet beneath the surface of their exchange, a new question lingered in her mind: how far was she willing to go to claim her future? As the silence continued, a chilling uncertainty draped over her. Would their shared blood unite them in understanding or tear them apart as they both faced painful truths? The ground felt unstable, but for Sarah, it was a risk worth taking, the unfolding narrative of her life calling for her to step boldly forward. With a heavy heart and an uncertain future, she prepared herself for whatever words would emerge from his lips next. Would this be the moment that defined them, or the moment that unraveled them? The atmosphere in her father's office hung heavy with unspoken emotions as Sarah steadfastly bore the weight of her words. She felt like a warrior in a realm where the stakes were nothing short of her identity. "You have to understand that I want to innovate, not destroy," she pressed, her voice steady despite the turmoil within. Her father sifted through the pages of unyielding success he had built, an empire thriving under the banner of tradition and legacy. But the flames of understanding flickered in his eyes, gradually giving way to a grudging respect. "What makes you think you can disrupt something that has brought us stability?" he asked, his tone softer but laced with skepticism. "Because I've lived in your shadow long enough. I've danced to your tune, and now it's my turn to craft the music," Sarah replied, her conviction igniting a spark of confidence. This was not merely about strategy, this was a profound declaration of her autonomy. For a brief moment, her father's stern facade shattered, revealing a vulnerability that echoed in the air between them. "And what if you fail, Sarah? What if trying to break free from the foundation I provided leaves you with nothing?" The worry etched across his features made her heart ache. Yet, she couldn't waver. She was reclaiming her story. "I would rather struggle in my own right than succeed at the expense of being someone I'm not," she declared, the steel behind her words quaking through the room. Would he finally recognize that her pursuit of independence was rooted in love rather than rebellion? The room echoed with a silence so profound it felt as though time had stilled. She held her breath, wondering if the space between them could witness an evolution. Finally, he sighed, a release of tension she hadn't expected. "Perhaps we can discuss this further," he conceded slowly. As relief washed over Sarah, she realized that she had achieved something monumental, a dialogical bridge between her desires and her father's reservations. She proved to him and to herself that she could own her ambitions, navigating a pathway shaped by her values rather than submerged in fear. And with that opening, a new conversation unfurled. Sarah and her father spent hours exchanging ideas and discussing visions, crafting a cohesive strategy born from their respective strengths. It was a pivotal transformation for their relationship. She wasn't just his daughter anymore, but a partner in securing their future. As the sun began to set, painting the office in warm hues, Sarah felt the palpable shift inside her, an uplifting wave of confidence coursing through her veins. She had not only defended her autonomy but also paved the way for collaboration. The shadows of their past began to fade as they embraced a collective vision for the future. After leaving her father's office, Sarah strolled through the bustling city streets, her heart fluttering with a triumphant sense of accomplishment. The sense of credibility she had long sought was finally hers. The understanding that her journey intertwined with her father's but was not bound by it was liberating. In the weeks that followed, she poured herself into her new responsibilities, applying her innovative ideas seamlessly into her father's business model. The community responded positively, recognizing the changes she initiated as both progressive and respectful of tradition. She had conquered her doubts, having successfully transformed her vision into a reality shared with her father. Their bond deepened as they worked in synergy, and slowly, the shadows that threatened her attempts at independence began to recede, replaced by a burgeoning legacy they could build together. Words of encouragement from those around her reinforced her newfound resolve. "You are a force to reckon with, Sarah," Marco had told her after she implemented her first substantial project. Each time he praised her, she felt validated, recognized, and admired for her strength, a far cry from the trembling woman she had once been. She thrived in the intricate dance of power and influence, reveling in her capability. No longer was she a reluctant participant in her own life, she was an active architect, designing her own journey while connecting with those who could help bring it to fruition. As she gazed out at the city skyline from her apartment window, a profound sense of pride steadied her heart. She had emerged stronger than ever, armed with the knowledge that true power came from within, born from conviction and the willingness to confront fear. The touched lives of her family and community stood testament to that profound transformation. In that moment of realization, Sarah's heart swelled with gratitude. The journey had transformed her into a woman defined by resilience, tenacity, and courage. With a palpable sense of fulfillment pulsing through her, she silently vowed to continue building not just her life but a legacy that honored the struggles of her past while embracing the promise of her future. She had won her freedom, and with it, the exhilarating possibility of endless horizons stretched before her. Now would be the time to embrace every opportunity, to affirm her place and become the artist of her own fate, and in this newfound power, she realized it was essential to share her journey, writing, mentoring, and inspiring. She would invite those who had once felt trapped to join her, use their voices, and foster a tapestry woven with stories of resilience and transformation. Every beginning is a call to action. And Sarah knew hers would demand the same from others. You're inspired by Sarah's story of transformation and empowered to navigate your own journey boldly. You need to subscribe now to our channel. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help these transformative stories reach more hearts. Comment below on your reactions and theories about how you would embrace your journey or support someone else. And don't wait even one more second to share this inspirational video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Let us spread empowerment.